So I managed to keep this going for a while, and I'm very proud of myself. Sadly, when it comes down to it, 2025 has claimed its first victim. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, I'm coming to you all with my out of theater, in the theater thoughts, this time on Death of a Unicorn, written and directed by Scharfman, and starring Jenna Ortega, Paul Rudd, and Will Poulter, among others. Story-wise, this is centered around Elliot and Ridley, a father-daughter duo who, while journeying to a crisis management summit for Elliot's boss, find their journey completely upended when they accidentally hit and end the life of a young unicorn. Whew, yeah, there's a lot to say, or not say even, about this one, but whew, I'm gonna do my best. All right. Whew, yes, I can do this. All right. Whew, okay. So, with that being said, I'm going to start with our pros, and with that being said, I'm going to mention some of our cast. So, you already know, because I say it all the time, but of course, as a quintessential 90s baby, I have to shout out some actors I became familiar with at a very young age. That includes Paul Rudd from Clueless, Téa Leoni from Deep Impact, and Richard E. Grant from Spice World. Ooh, what a time, what a time. Say what you want, but the memories. And so I will say, you know, there's something always special to me, and it's not just nostalgia. I mean, it is nostalgia, but it's just also just the appreciation and just understanding like what it means to start your appreciation of film from a younger age, whether they're good or bad films or whatever, but it's just the experience of them. And then, you know, getting older and seeing those actors in other projects and just seeing how the years pass and how you can kind of grow with actors throughout their careers as they get older and you get older. And I know it's kind of a parasocial thing, but it's something that I find to be really poignant. And it's just something I do appreciate whenever I take the time to think about it. And considering that we had 3 actors who were a big part of that era for me, I naturally had to shout them out. As someone who is a fan of both the horror and fantasy genres, it was somewhat interesting seeing that mashup here. You know, now the balance of it is something else, but just seeing the incorporation of those two things together, I was kind of like, And I have to say, if anyone has watched The Cabin in the Woods and you've seen a certain creature, obviously, that makes an appearance in that film, then this is almost giving you an idea of what a film just centered around that would look like. I also have to say it was really nice seeing Anthony Carrigan here. Although I do know his breakout role was in Barry. I haven't personally had the chance to check out that series yet, although I've heard great things. But my personal introduction to him was as Victor Zsasz in Gotham. I know Gotham is a show that had a whole lot going on, but I'm not even gonna act like it didn't have me hooked. It was a whole lot going on. They definitely remixed a whole lot within the Batman universe, but I was here for it. I was tuned in. So naturally, it was really nice seeing him pop up in this film as well. And I can absolutely say that his character Griff was the highlight here. I just found that he made the experience just somewhat more enjoyable than I expected. And as someone who naturally has a bad case of wanderlust all the time, I love the fact that this was shot in Hungary, because these mountain ranges, oh my, I mean, stunning, overwhelming, distinctive. Yeah, I mean, I love a good mountain range regardless, but these, yeah, that entire sequence we get on the highway when we're just seeing like the vast mountain ranges throughout the land, I was totally here for that. So as far as my cons, listen, I don't really know what I was expecting from this particular film, but I do know whatever that was was not it. Oh my gosh. I don't, boy. I'm a little lost because there's so much going on here and nothing going on at the same time. So it's really hard to even get a gauge for how I really feel about this, because I just was like, ugh, I was over it very quickly. So for starters, I will simply circle back around to the cast again. I did mention, of course, earlier that there were a lot of actors in this film that I was familiar with. That also includes Jenna Ortega as our lead. Look, I am not mad at anyone being successful in Hollywood, you know, getting their coins, getting those checks, getting those roles, getting more visibility. I'm never mad at that, right? But I feel like I'm getting a little too overexposed to Jenna Ortega, and I know you can't help that someone ends up in a lot of films, but I think probably what makes it worse for me, or at least makes me feel that way, is the fact that she's doing this whole angsty teen character performance again. Like, we're gonna have to find something else. I was so over it. Like, it's Wednesday, Beetlejuice, this film. And I'm sure there are some others that I'm discounting, but I think between her, you know, seeing her in this role before, and then personally being over the angsty teen archetype anyway, I just found it to be incredibly frustrating. I was just like, can we not do this yet again? I mean, from the weird haircut with the dyed tips, the piercing, the mascara, you know, the painted nails, you know, the baggy clothing. It's so lame and it's so overdone. Like, can we see something else? And it's the same dynamic where it's like the angsty teen has a bad relationship with the parent for whatever reason, and then, you know, they are trying to connect, and, you know, they don't really see eye to eye, and the parent is trying, but the child is not open. I was just like, I don't care. I'm sorry. Maybe if this was done differently or handled differently, I would have been fine, but I was over it. I got so tired of seeing from both her and Paul Rudd. I also, of course, enjoy Paul Rudd, not just as an actor, but as a person, but this is his typical shtick. This is very much Ant-Man, you know, without the extra humor and extra action and superhero theatrics. But it's kind of that same kind of goofy awkwardness, and it didn't do anything for me here. I was not a fan of that. And although I have to say the performances, in my opinion, are not great, I think the material, the writing, the screenplay does them absolutely no favors. I just thought this was such a flat film, especially with the dialogue. And again, I understand that every piece of dialogue isn't going to leap off the screen, but I found that so much of the dialogue in this film, especially for it to be a dark comedy, fell completely flat. And if you are going to try to incorporate comedy there, then make the most of it. There were so many lines here that fell flat, especially in the theater. You know, there were little laughs here and there. There may be like a couple of moments where it was actually funny, but most of the time I was just like, if this is what we were going to do, we could have just played this straight. I honestly think this probably would have worked better as a horror fantasy, and then we could have done something with that. It would have been, you know, a different take, you know, a different kind of situation than we've seen. But this jumble of story beats and tones and subplots, I did not care for it at all. And since, of course, there is a unicorn at the core of this story, let me just say that the CGI did not like it. Now, I will say it got better during the nighttime scenes because, you know, it's harder to see some of those finer details, but whenever the sun was out, you could really see how bad it was. And it wasn't just the detail of CGI. Obviously, it looked very cartoonish and very fake, but I think what made it worse is that the movements were horrible. It was like this weird it was like this weird herky-jerky thing. Listen, I don't know a whole lot about unicorns, but my assumption is that they move very similar to actual horses. So the creaky joint running and movements, it was very off-putting. And I don't think it was intended in that way. If it was, maybe I missed it, but I'm pretty sure just the CGI and the movements were not giving what they needed to at all. And lastly, I have to say the pacing was unbearable. This was an hour and 48 minutes, and it felt like 2 hours and 48 minutes. It refused to end. I was just like, please. You know, whenever I get to that point, you know it's not going well. I'm just like, and I kind of felt it early on, but I'm like, maybe. No, I think before we even got to the halfway mark, I was like, oh my gosh. And I think what made it worse is that I think, you know, with the dialogue I mentioned earlier, I think this film obviously was trying to play with some kind of satire, and so the characters would, you know, spout off and have these, you know, I don't know, monologues, or just have this, you know, these back and forth kind of dialogues, and they would just say stuff.
And they would just say this, and they would say that, and they would say this, and they would go, and then you got that, and you da da da, and da da da, and da da. Shut the up!
They would not shut up. And maybe I wouldn't care if the dialogue was good. For example, Black Bag. Black Bag was a very slow-moving film, but I was into it because every time the character said something, I was like, wait, oh, hold on, oh, what? Ooh, no, whoa, you know. They were like, it was like a sparring match. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that dynamic here, but nothing the characters said were of any interest. And then, of course, we do that thing where the solution to what the character should do to get themselves out of danger because of what's happened, and it's very simple, it's very straightforward, but they are sitting around doing the absolute dumbest things. And I try my best to have my suspension of disbelief, but I was just like, ain't no way. So I was done very quickly. This was not good at all. Now, I feel good about the fact that I made it a good way into the year, almost April, without having a moment like this. But Death of a Unicorn is an absolute no. I would rather get stabbed by a unicorn than watch that again. Sorry. I can definitely say that when it comes to distribution, A24 tends to have some fairly top tier films, even if it isn't for everyone. And I do appreciate the fact that this was a different concept, but this and A24, ooh. Ooh, no. It is not going to join the ranks as films I will appreciate and truly value when it comes to A24. This, throw it in the trash. Death of a Unicorn will be released in theaters on March 28th. You guys are free to check it out, if you so choose. Feel free to let me know your thoughts down below, and let me know what you think. Yeah, it's time for me to go soothe myself with some dessert, some ginger ale, something. I need to decompress. So, without further ado, this is, once again, the Movieman signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.